it's on grief we go, gotta learn to let it go.
Welcome to Wake the F Up podcast, where we talk about living consciously and helping people uncover their essential selves so that they can stop sleepwalking through life. Welcome to Wake the F Up podcast. I am your host. Happy 2025. I am Alex Long, and this is my co-host and love of my life and husband, Dr. David Long. Welcome back. So we've been on a bit of a hiatus on vacation, and we are back for the new year. Our kids officially went back to school today. So those parents out there who are listening, yes, it's time to finally get reorganized and get ourselves back on routine. How have you been feeling?
Good. It was good to go back to work.
Yeah, you took the longest break maybe that you've ever taken in the holidays?
No, well, holidays, yeah.
Holidays.
Yeah. I took 2 weeks off when I first got into private practice once.
Yeah.
And it was a disaster.
Yeah, the holidays fell, as everyone knows, on kind of bizarre days, middle of the week. And so David took off from the week of Christmas all the way to the Sunday before this Monday.
Good. I told my staff, actually, that when you get to be my age and you take 2 weeks off, you really start to think about retirement.
It's true.
Well, you used to start thinking, could I do this every day? You know, would this be okay?
I know. We had a very busy holiday season in our family, but we did really good, and I think in setting some parameters to keep ourselves, mitigate as much grief or extraneous grief that I think really helped us, because per usual, the holidays are always really challenging when you're a widow and you come from a grieving space.
I actually would say, just like every other holiday, the premonition of what it's going to be like is worse than the reality.
That's actually true.
Since the first one. I dreaded the first one. I was...
The first Christmas after Betsy died?
I was completely in the fetal position, worried about the kids. And it really, it was not great, but it wasn't anything like I thought it would be. It was, the kids actually were pretty happy. And it went off, it was okay.
Yeah, I thought today we might talk about navigating grief through the lens of a family dynamic. So to the listeners out there who are experiencing loss, what it feels like to do that as a family. And maybe even I guess what's heavy on my mind right now is simultaneously all of our children are in really different stages of the grieving process.
Yeah, so this actually was something I wanted to talk about.
Yeah.
One that I've realized recently. It's a little bit of an aside to what you're saying.
It's okay.
That I have recently realized that, as I work on myself, go through my past and my parents and my childhood and all that kind of stuff, it's come to me that one of the disconnects between my kids and I is that they don't have that experience. So what I just assumed was universal, it's just me. It's just my life. And I think that has caused kind of continual problems with me communicating with them, because I assume that they're seeing. What made me think about it was the grief. Like when Betsy first died, I really did have the thought that we were all in this together. Like it was the same for all of us. And that could not be further from the truth. Their experience is completely different than ours. And each individual kid's experience is different with ours, depending on their relationship with the spouse that died, and the relationship with the surviving spouse, and
where they are in their life too.
How old they are.
What did you say in our family? So we have 6 children. For those of you who are new, we both are widows. David lost his wife, Betsy, quickly to a brain aneurysm, and I lost my first husband to cancer, kind of a longer journey. My children were really young. Yours were varied in ages, but mostly like middle school-ish and above.
High school and middle school.
Yeah. And so we've got now 6 children. We just had our first baby, Genevieve. She's 4 months old this month. And we've got 5 other grievers that came in various points when their parent died, and in various ways. But it's so interesting to me. I mean, have you noticed just how different each child is and how they see grief and deal with grief and what they
One
are?
of the things I think as a parent, particularly when you have a lot of kids, is you really want to paint with a broad brush because it's so much easier. You know what I mean? You want to kind of treat them all the same. You want to approach them the same. You want to communicate with them the same, and that's just not the way it works. Now, they do have some, core similarities. They were raised in the same house by the same people and genetically are similar, obviously. But
I also think the loneliness, the not belonging, is a universal thread among all of our children. So and ourselves. Well, maybe me. I can't say you speak for that, but I think that our children. I think because I am the daughter of a narcissist who abandoned me, around the age of 18, and obviously before that, just he was in proximity, but maybe not necessarily connected. I feel a loss of a parent in that because I don't have a father. And it feels like you don't always belong when you're in that space. And I do see that almost all of our children experience that in some moments. It may not be all the time, but it's like they don't have a mother, therefore they don't fully know where they fit in.
I think I was thinking the more universal thing is anxiety. That we all feel some type of anxiety, and I can't help but think that it's at least partially related to the uncontrollable loss. Because we've all had a loss that we didn't have any control over, there's this kind of underlying feeling of, you can lose the things you love anytime without any warning, and that kind of leads to generalized anxiety. You're kind of anxious about everything, really.
Yeah.
And I think everybody in our family, in some way, has some anxiety. Even the ones that you don't think, I think they do.
Anxiety, as we've talked about so many times on the show, even when we're just talking about our own personal versions of it, is so common. And I think that there's not a person that walks through life that doesn't experience grief. And if you are in the midst of a grief journey of some...
And I do think anxiety is common in modern society. I just think it's a little bit more acute in our family. It's a little bit more... maybe the coping strategies are not quite as healthy as they could be.
Well, and I think all people experience grief. And of course, as I said, and I think all people experience anxiety to some degree. And I think anxiety is like pretty regular. Like I think a lot of people have a lot of anxiety, but I think the difference for our kids...
Some have a lot and some have a little, but it seems like almost everybody has some.
I think everybody has a decent amount and some cope with it better than others. And I think some people mask it better than others, right? So may not talk about it. But I think come to realize, I've been coaching clients and I had a recent interaction with someone who just lost someone. And I was thinking about this person has it all together. Like you look at this on the outside and you're like, holy shit, like very wealthy, beautiful family, exercises, healthy, like, and a normal thing, like after losing a parent, which this was this case, everything gets shattered of what you know to be true from that moment that the loss initiates. And I think obviously this has happened in our family and this happens outside of our family. It's like you have the initial loss. And when that happens, it shatters every part of who you were prior to that big impact. It's like almost like a car crash or a shattering, as I call it. And after the shattering, you're trying to put the pieces back and go back to your normalcy. But if it's a really close person to you that you've lost or someone that's integral in your life, you can't put those pieces back the same way. You're different. You see everything really differently in the world. And I think that in itself causes a shit ton of anxiety about like the fragility and the lack of control that we have in this life.
Well, I was going to say that the curse may be the anxiety, but I think the gift is that we're aware of it.
Well, that's what I was going to say. It's the loss of control, that we're actually not in control.
Yeah.
So that's universally what I see across the board with all my clients and any walk of person who's dealing with something heavy. They're like, when they connect with the true self and they're working on a healing path, they're like, oh my God, I don't have control of anything. Like, I'm actually really not in control. And then this surrendering, as we've said in the past, is like, okay, well, I'm not in control. That brings on a decent amount of anxiety, which is why I think our kids have such intense anxiety, is that they're aware, as many adults become in like their midlife journey, that there's not a lot of control, or those of us who have walked, serious loss. Mm-hmm. So it's interesting. This holiday was really beautiful in lots of ways. Some of the traditions that we have kind of put in motion, it's sort of hilarious. Like, some of the stuff I do is just like a crapshoot. Like, I did the bougie tree with no personal ornaments because I didn't want everyone to be so sad. Well, that's now become kind of a tradition, and I think the kids have settled into it. I had a good laugh about, there's always been a fight. Our previous families separately and simultaneously had real trees that we went and picked out at tree farms, or even in the forest for this one over here. And like, such a beautiful thing, right? It's like very 1950s. Like, the whole family gets the tree, and then we decorate the tree together, and then, like, it's precious. And then you pull out your ornaments and you think about these ornaments you've had collected throughout your life. I've talked about this many times. The ornaments are really a tough grieving linking object. And they never stop being sad, after you lose someone. And so the kids have always wanted a real tree. Texas is weird. Like, most people do fake trees. And we did this huge fake tree every year.
Well, this part of Texas, for sure.
This part of Texas, yeah. And so, interestingly enough, I was like, all right, you know what, screw it. I'm going to get on top of my A game and order a real tree, have it delivered at the house, and then we can put it up, and then the kids can decorate as they see fit with the ornaments of their choice. So if they want to dive in and get back into the childhood ornaments that might make them sad, then, we'll allow space for that. It was super interesting because the tree came in a box and was delivered via, UPS or whatever. And literally one of our children hit and ran over the tree with their car.
Probably. She denies it. But
there's a lot of denying going on about that. But the box had definitely been ran over by someone, and I'm certain UPS would not have backed over a package. They just deliver their price. I'm like, you do not know. But I'm assuming they're better than that. Anyway, so that was a giggle. The box was literally like ran over. And then the tree, once we unpacked it, had a very Snoopy-like bend to it. It was very Charlie Brown.
And how high was it? It was supposed to be?
It's supposed to be 9 feet. We got a 4.5. It was just like everything you could imagine. It was actually really fat too. Like, it was really good and thick, but it also had this like big bend, and like where the damage to the tree had taken place, the needles started to the tree started to die. And this thing, it didn't matter how much we watered it, but it was not taking on life in the way a normal tree would. And I just thought to myself, like, I'm always doing this. Like, I'm always trying to codependently or preventatively mitigate all of our things that could trigger. And then sometimes when I'm like, I need to stop that. Like, I need to stop the people pleasing and allow for us to feel it all, which sometimes it's really overwhelming. And then I get the tree, and then not one person or put an ornament on. The only ornament that made that tree this year was a Chick-fil-A ornament that my kids picked up through the drive-thru, which was just really comical. And so then I went ahead and bought everybody their own like ornament boxes for Christmas. That's something they will not appreciate it this year, of course. They zoom past that gift. And I've been buying them their own ornaments that kind of symbolize their year for the last couple years without their notice, because that's like not a gift anyone cares about except for me. But I know to be true that I was like, I'm going to start these collection of ornaments for them, so when they move out and have their own homes, they can go back through their life and like have some connection to this space in their life of, where they were, and think about the years. And it's just funny, that tree, it went out to the garbage, and it only made one ornament. It was sad, but funny.
Yeah.
And that's probably our family in a nutshell, right?
Yeah, it's okay.
So as we want to talk about why it's difficult in grief, your traditions go away when the person you had the traditions with goes away. You can keep the traditions, and that is like totally to each his own, right? Like each family will decide what they're going to keep and what they're going to let go of. Oddly enough, like your kids, hilariously enough, are attached to scratch off like tickets, lotto tickets. And that was a thing that was done in their mom's family. And that has been brought to every family function by David's oldest daughter. And it's caught on like a wildfire. Like my siblings have now started to do it for their kids. I'm like, we're all gonna have a gambling problem with this, but you know, you'll take some of these traditions and you'll naturally weave them into your new life. And some of them will be so difficult to swallow, you can't do it anymore, or it just doesn't even feel right. Like even if it was like a beautiful tradition, you emotionally may not be ready, and without that prior family being there, it might be challenging to go backwards.
Also, like how do traditions start? You know.
Yeah, it's so interesting, right?
I was talking to my oldest daughter about some of the traditions that we had and that she missed, and most of them were not intentional at all. They were very accidental shit that we did just to survive, and but kids don't recognize that you're just trying to survive. They think it's
a planned tradition.
Yeah.
am actually very conscious of traditions. Traditions have been something that I felt like strongly have been represented in my family of origin. So like that was one of the great things my mom always did, is that she really instilled a few familial traditions and then talked about why it was important and why my grandmother did it and maybe even her grandmother. And I can think of a few.
I have mixed feelings about that. I mean, I'm not paranoid. I'm cautious of traditions just for tradition.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think that some traditions can be nice if they're intentional.
Intentional is crucial.
Meaningful and not overly forced. I think that's okay. But like my oldest told me that one of our traditions was we would have these croissants for Christmas morning.
Yeah, that's nice.
Like frozen croissants. And she thought that was a tradition, but actually it was just because Betsy couldn't cook, and she really couldn't. So we couldn't make Christmas breakfast, so we had to buy it. And but she thinks that we have to have the Williams-Sonoma croissants every year.
And I buy the Williams-Sonoma croissants.
They're actually quite good, but the point is
they are lovely.
It wasn't intentional at all. It was just...
Well, and it stuck with Jack, too, because despite probably having a conversation with him the Christmas morning after we opened presents, he said, "Where are the croissants?"
Yes.
Which is funny, you know, and it's something to think about when you get remarried and blend two grieving families. I think we're unique. That's not a really common thing. But for anyone out there who marries into a widowed family or is hosting something with someone with grief, you know, you really have to hold space for the people that are not there in the ways that are valuable for the children. And when you don't, there's grief. And when you do, I hate to break this to you, there's grief. And one of the things I've learned is I have to be really brave in holding and carrying traditions. Like I get stressed to do anything holiday oriented that I'm going to step on toes and cause more grief.
Either way, it doesn't feel like it's you. You know, it's
right.
If you ignore the tradition, then you're doing something intentional that because of something. And if you try to weave the tradition in, then it's not really your tradition. It's somebody else's tradition you already met.
Right.
So it gets your identity can get kind of gray.
Thankfully, we have so many kids that I absolutely love to cook, but I'm the main chef of this house, and it's helpful actually to have the croissants on Christmas morning because I'm pretty burned out after wrapping and doing all the things, you know. So that's been a nice addition actually, and an easy morning once it's all said and done. But yeah, so it's something to think about, you know. I think we've been thinking a lot about who are we now. You know, we're year 5 and 6 post loss, and actually this week would be, I think, what did we say? My 15th wedding anniversary. Mm-hmm. Tomorrow, actually, and Surprisingly, I'm not feeling grief around that today. I can't speak how I may wake up tomorrow feeling a little bit, but I'm feeling more in this marriage without the wovenness of my other marriage this year more than anything. I think we are consciously choosing things for us, and we have been from the get-go, but we almost did it in like a way that you set a boundary, right, in the beginning, where you're kind of like angry about it. You're like, I deserve to be happy, and like choosing things for ourselves, and then kind of you almost like make decisions and then put a protection layer on where you're waiting for people to be upset all the time. And now I feel like maybe people being upset has become like something I can handle a lot more.
Yeah, I mean, I feel a lot better saying this is what we're doing.
Yeah, I do too.
I don't really need a committee meeting of the extended people.
Even our children, I would say some advice.
In particular, our children.
Yeah, saying some advice to the newer families out there who, let's say you're a widow or, lost your partner that you had children with, and then you remarried, repartner in some capacity. Your children's grief is personal. It will be their grief, and it will be a part of their journey for the rest of their life, I'm learning. You don't know how to predict when it's going to come on them. I mean, holidays are usually a pretty high chance that we're going to hit some kind of grief from everybody. Birthdays, graduations, major milestones in the kids' lives will definitely have a lacing of sadness. But you can't prepare for it. And I've mitigated these moments a lot, especially with David's children. And sometimes I catch myself burning out as the mother figure, trying to give them everything to avoid upsetting. And at the end of the day, you could really lose yourself in that. Like, I will people please to the point where it's not healthy. And then inevitably the grief will come and I'll be exhausted. And then there's a refractory period for me for that, where I'm like, we're never going to be happy is kind of an internal voice I hear. We're never going to be able to be happy. Even though we're happy, no one really wants us to be happy. That's like my inner child talking, and it's
that's very much your feeling.
It is totally mine. He doesn't feel this. I don't know why this is personal to me. It could be a mothering thing. Any mothers out there listening who might be experiencing something like this, like, I wonder, like, I'm thinking of a few widows that I know that have repartnered, not quite married yet, but repartnered, and I wonder if they have the same energy. Like, I deserve to be happy, and then like when everybody in the world outside of your non-family or even your children in your family get their grief or get upset about something you've chosen.
And for me, it was very different. I went from codependency and people-pleasing, where all of a sudden I had the opportunity to say what I wanted. So I now, maybe not as bearishly as I should, but I still do more than I ever have, as far as this is what I want and I don't care.
Yeah. Well, in order to have the life that you want to lead, and we're rolling into 2025 and it's New Year's resolutions, we both feel kind of, I think because we lead an intentional life and we have to work extremely hard to be mindful. That comes with a lot of ups and downs with all the grief in our house. And just like our kids are developmentally processing and growing and changing, and as they grow and change, I remember one of my kids' early therapists from when they were very little, their first therapist, who was a genius, she said at every developmental stage, they're going to re-grieve their parent over and over and over and over again. So parents out there struggling, like, this is never going to end. Well, it's different. They're down the river of grief, as my therapist would say. However, they're in the station of the life that they're in, and whatever developmental milestone they're in, they're going to re-grieve the loss of the parent. Just like you would grieve at high school graduation, and you'd also grieve the parent in a different way at your wedding or when you had a baby down the road, So I just think we don't do resolutions per se. Interestingly enough, like Carl and I did intense amount of resolutions. We would write down a little to-do list, and we would New Year's Eve go through them and laugh, like having a glass of champagne, laughing about like, what did we accomplish, what did we not accomplish. But we were really specific about these like 25 million goals that we wanted for ourselves. over the top, right? Like, and now I'm like, I'm not trying to press on my nervous system this hard. Like, I know in my heart what I want to accomplish with this family and where I want to be. And I know that comes from small
My only resolution
changes.
is to keep doing what we're doing and keep going. Because we're not doing the same thing on a day-to-day basis. It's a continual process. And every week and every day and every month is different. And
right. So for the grievers out there, like, if you're feeling pressed to push all these, like, in 2025, I got to get over this. And in 2025, I got to lose 47 million pounds. And I just, like, all those things, I think once you've been through a massive loss, like, you don't have the nervous system energy to lie to yourself anymore.
yeah.
And if you are lying, it's only to protect yourself and get out of a conversation that is going to cause more problems. Where you're like, everything's fine, because you're like, I know if I tell this person how I actually feel, like, they're not even going to be able to handle it. And so those are the only spaces where lying is more beneficial than it is to tell the truth. And so you can't lie to yourself. Like, you're not going to fake it through these goals. But that being said, 2025, like, compared to 2024, I think it's fun to do a reflection, which is, I think, why I like setting goals for the year, why I did in the past, is I actually like to look back on where I was, which is, I think, is more valuable, and see how far I've come. Because when you're in a grief space and you've dealt with a lot of loss, or your family is going through a lot of loss, you can feel like you're treading water all the time. Like, things are really heavy and hard.
I feel like you're just barely getting by.
Right.
But I don't feel like that at all.
Lately, I've been feeling that vibe again a lot. I would say that...
You are barely getting by.
Yes. I mean, I am...
Barely sleeping. You're barely...
Not sleeping. Honestly enough, it's not Genevieve. So it's funny, like, I think I'm having definitely postpartum blues, and I recognized it several weeks ago. And, I realized I needed probably a new therapist, and really don't want to start a new therapist because of the trauma history being so intense. And we've been doing a lot of different modalities, but I can't move my body in the same way postoperatively yet. And I'm really tired, So, like, those things, all the coping strategies I once used, as can happen with women or people in transition, they're not working. And so I have to, like, recreate new resiliency routines and find ways that help me rebuild in my energy field. And that's been really tough. So I have been feeling like more of like a treading water, energetically speaking, and just a lot more sadness than I normally do. So when I look back, it does actually help me to remind myself, like, a year ago, as I said in the retreat video, like, a year ago from the retreat, I was saying that I wanted to get pregnant. Now here we are with the baby. And several years ago, we weren't together. And then we were. And then I was scared to death of our first Christmas as a family. And we were so scared, actually, of our first Christmas. Our kids, actually, we didn't even celebrate a Christmas until after the kids were at their grandparents and doing different things.
I mean, I've said this 100 times, that the holidays are really hard for us, generally. But every other day is an amazing gift. I'm very grateful Monday through Sunday most weeks. Actually, kind of flexing my parent role a little bit, because you're so busy, and I like it. I drive Kate to school every day. I love it. I pick up the boys sometimes. I like that. I'm a little bit more involved in the day-to-day, the homework, stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
I really like it.
You're calendaring for the first time ever?
Calendaring, yeah. So I'm getting more organized. I'm trying to support Alix the best I can.
You're doing a good job.
I can't always give her what she needs, but I try, and I try to listen to what she needs, and let her do what she's doing right now, which is really taking care of a newborn, which is a full-time job.
Full-time job.
And
we're lucky. We have a lot of people to help in our family, because we have a big family.
My kids are very independent.
For those of you grieving out there, or even new moms, there is a level of loss in new motherhood, which is like, on one hand, you have this beautiful baby, right, that you've dreamed of for, lots of hours. And the joy that she brings is second to none, really. Like her smile, her cooing, her talks in the morning. She wakes us up every morning now in full conversation, talk about long-winded. Our baby is not even saying words yet, but she's cooing in like full conversation in her crib, her cradle in her room. And it's just magical to wake up to that. She's happy all the time. She's just such a joy to be around. But, you know, you can have, just like anything in life, like this most incredible love and power and just like everything you could ever hope for in an infant, you know, I have in her, and still have loss around the transition into this phase of motherhood. And it is, you know, you lost your body trying to figure out and regain it. You've lost, well, really time. Time is really valuable and really challenging when you're a new mom and you're breastfeeding. You sort of have to lose a little bit of connection with your other children if you have multiples, in order to be a efficient caregiver to an infant, you know? So I've lost sort of like a lot of time with my other kids, and like they're definitely clinging to David, which is really healthy for them. And I think it's healthy for everybody, but it can be sad a little bit. And you kind of lose your identity too, where you have a low libido, you know, you are tired, you're not able to work out the way you were able to work out. You don't feel necessarily like yourself. And I think it takes most women postnatally a good while to get back into a rhythm of where they feel a new normal, or even some sense of like an identity, other than like covered in throw up and, you know, all the things. And I thought this might be different this time because I have so much more flexibility and so much more support, and it's so chosen. But there's just a ribbon of that I now realize that is motherhood. That is just motherhood. It's like you are giving, and like something in that balance throws you off emotionally a little bit. And then there's also just the sheer factor of all the hormone changes. So if you're in loss and you're feeling tired and it's January and you're feeling as though you should be better and doing more and seeing all these people like kick up their workouts and kick up their resolutions and doing all these things, I don't know. I invite us all, including myself, to just embrace a lack of doing more when you're already feeling the fragility of burnout. You know, like I'm definitely in that space, and I'm like, instead of doing more, I need to do less, and I need to ask for more.
Yeah, I actually think that's probably what I don't like about New Year's resolutions, is that it implies that you never do enough. You know, you're never going to be the right weight. You're never going to be, this year I need to do blank because I didn't do it last year. I mean, I don't like that. I would rather figure out what we need to do today, right now, and do it, and don't do what we don't need to do. And
well, I think a lot of what we talk about in terms of healing from loss or grief or even transitioning your life, I mean, my end goal for the clients that come to Wake would be, if they've dealt with a loss, it's not necessarily to sit inside the loss all the time, right? I even don't want to sit inside my own loss too long, because it's heavy with zero resolve, right? I started seeing a new therapist.
Where there's no life there.
There's no, right. That's very poignant statement. There is no more life there.
Right.
The life there has ended. And so you have to process it and integrate it, right? You have to figure out a way to integrate this massive loss, and it becomes a part of you. But the choice piece that you should focus on in the new year and in general in loss is, who am I? Who do I want to be now that I've uncoupled, if you're a widow, or had this massive loss, if you've lost a parent or a child? You know, it's like the loss happened and it's terrible. And it's always going to be terrible. I went to a new therapist, as I was saying. We did the sound therapy. She's a somatic experiencer amongst many other modalities. And I listened to a 4.5-minute sound. And she was like, and then I'd like to see what comes up for you. It felt like EMDR in that way. Like she wanted to see what happened in my brain when I listened to this sound wave. The sound wave was very like hospital music, elevator music / hold. I already told you all this. And it's kind of unglued me a little bit in the sense that years later, all these imagery and PTSD imagery came up for me surrounding hospital trauma. And even actually being on hold with like a scary phone call. That can happen a lot in business, and it happened a lot in cancer. Like the waiting for dreaded news was kind of in the imagery of that. And if we sit inside of this loss, I mean, it can drown me. It can drown me. When I think about all the shit my kids went through, all the things that I've witnessed, all the visual images and triggers I have from cancer and from hospitals, it can really take me down. I don't want to stay there. I want to process it, and I want to integrate it, and I want to move on. So I do recommend that we all do the work to get on the other side of acceptance of these major, major painful incidences. But I do not think it's good for us to sit inside of it. There is no life there. And I think that could be literally like our mission statement. So it's interesting. Like, I am afraid moving forward and seeing what all the trauma is sitting inside my brain, but that I haven't somehow yet dealt with in the 11 years of therapy. I mean, that's tiring to think about, kind of, right?
Yeah, but from an intellectual and like a therapy point of view, I think it's really interesting that when we go into our body, we go to pretty specific traumatic places.
Totally.
If you think about it, the reason you went there, and I do the same thing when I do that work. The reason you go there is it's there all the time.
It's there all the time, subconsciously.
It's not. You don't have to go anywhere. It's right there. I've been amazed in like meditation how fast you can get there. It's right there.
Well, she said the most powerful thing too. So I did that sound therapy, and it was 4.5 minutes, and then of course then she took me in an embodiment practice. So anyone out there who is looking to feel your body embodiment through your grief and your traumas or post-loss, I highly recommend a somatic experiencer. It's a very, very long education process by Peter Levine. He's really the leader of the polyvagal theory. He's amazing. So this whole thing was to sit inside my body and then feel, after I kind of told her what I was hearing and feeling, or what I was seeing in my brain, excuse me. We talked about what did I feel sensation-wise in my body. And there were so many sensations, and they were all in the family of
I actually might mildly
anxiety.
with you now that I've done it a couple of times. And I think your sister might agree with this. I think you need to be
resourced
in a certain state of mind and with some pretty decent coping strategies and in a safe place in your general life to really go into somatics. So I think it can be really scary if you're not prepared.
I think, well, you have to have a right resourcer.
Had I done it before, just started with that, I think I probably would have stopped going because it's so scary. It's really, really scary.
That might be true. I actually think it's a lot easier for intense nervous systems. I think you have to have the right practitioner. So your practitioner shouldn't lead you into what just happened to me. She actually was testing the water to see how reactive my brain was if I was to go on my own and do sound therapy. So if I was going to listen to these things as homework, what were the things that were coming up? And after she heard what happened in my brain, she was like, okay, well, we're not going to do any homework for now. Like, okay, I think she was like, holy shit, a lot came up for you here.
Yeah, I don't think really.
You have to also be able to down-regulate your patient. So like she then spent the remainder of the session, like over 30 minutes, we actually ran over, bringing my nervous system back down to baseline and teaching me, things that we even teach in the app, which is orient myself into the space. So you're like orienting into the room, looking at objects that are pretty around you, seeing how you feel in your body there, just so you know how to get yourself into a safer space. She also said the most powerful thing, which is definitely like so cool. It's like, I think it's IFS, but it's parts work. Essentially, she said, like, if your tears had words, what would they say? And I'm like, oh my God. So many things, right? But more than that, when you're thinking about grief space, she said, you need to tell, it's helpful to tell the parts of yourself that would need to be exposed that it's okay to be here. So she was talking to me to talk to my anxiety
Yeah.
and my fear. And she was saying, like, tell your fear and your sadness, it's okay to be here. And what if your fear and your sadness, which I was feeling in this, like, certain parts of my body, it's like chest and solar plexus in my throat. She was like, I'll imagine that the fear and the anxiety had room to spread out through your whole body.
Yeah.
And they had room to be. And I was like, I know it sounds kind of weird. Like, it sounds very woo-woo, but in that, like, I could feel literally like the pressure and like all the sensations that were kind of like heavy were dissipating and getting less intense.
Yeah, I've done similar.
Just witnessing it.
Like, she made me put all of my fear in a box.
Mm-hmm.
And what color was the box, and where is that box, and then
Right.
Okay, well, let that box. Let's just be that box. You are the whole box, and then you start working on changing that feeling from a negative fear, to an acceptance, and then like you change the color of the box. What's a pleasant color? Like I picked blue, and she said, "Well, can you see the box changing slowly to blue?" And I could see it. And as it changed colors, I felt differently about the fear.
In your body.
Yeah. It's really intense, though. I mean, it was really kind of scary.
It is, I think.
And it is very woo-woo, but I can't deny I felt it.
Right.
I did see it. I could have drawn it.
Well, because emotions
so clearly
cause bodily sensation. So emotions in our brain, fear in our brain, sadness from loss, they cause our body to go into protective state. So when you look at the polyvagal theory and you look at all this nervous system energy work, you realize that your nervous system is to respond, to protect you, right? So you're either in safety or you're in danger, right? You're safe to connect or you need to protect. Like, those are the energy fields that we go to all day long. That's happening. And so, but what we really don't realize is that when we've been through a lot of loss, that we're really in protection everywhere all the time. And to be honest, I think probably everyone is. Like,
I think so too. Yeah.
Children
I think
learn this very early.
The only difference is we're just aware of it. I think
Right.
Everybody is in that mode all the time.
Somatic experiencers will help you safely feel your way through some of your feelings in your body. So it's not so much like, I'm wrong in my head. It's more like, how did these emotions play out in my body? How can I bring attention into the now of some major thing maybe that was pulled from the past? And then you learn how to resource yourself, and and
unattach from it, or detach from it,
right?
So that it no longer seems adaptive, or because that's the way I felt about anxiety forever. If I was aware of it, which I was occasionally aware of it, I would accept it as I had to have this, like I needed this to do whatever thing that was making me anxious.
Which is not true.
No, in fact, it's the exact opposite. That anxiety can make you a very poor operator, or a very poor pilot, or a very poor parent. Whatever it is that causes anxiety, it doesn't help.
Right.
It inhibits, really.
Right.
And it also breeds. So when you're having interpersonal interactions, it's infectious. You can infect.
Well, and once you sit inside of yourself, as scary as that can be, you start to pay attention to other people's personal energy.
Yes.
One of the things I think that I instantly can feel people's energy everywhere I am.
Luckily, most of the time.
And mine with co-regulating.
There's still some connection there. There's still something. Every once in a while, I have talked to people that I've been like, whoa, way so far out into their anxiety and their fears that it almost feels like they could suck you into it, and you just don't want to, you really can't interact. I've had a handful of people like that in the last couple of years, and the only thing I can really do is just withdraw to protect myself from their anxiety and their fears.
Well, I think to the listeners out there, my point of this New Year's resolution was like, I'm trying a bunch. No, it all has points. Like, I've been trying to realize that grief, trauma. I think my grief journey has a lot of visual trauma. There was a lot of physical pain and problems with Carl's journey, and trying to be the keeper and the helper of both my children and keeping them safe and keeping him safe. while maintaining our financial and like all the normal young 30 things that you do, building career. And I had a lot of like holding up energy while internalizing a lot of extremely scary things that I didn't have time to like, I had to put it away to be okay for my kids, and put it away to put a brave face for him, and put it away so that I could go to work and pay our bills. And like all this put it away energy for me, even though I've done a ton of therapy, I'm realizing there's so much inside of me in layers. And as I peel back the layers of healing, I
think
I may never be done with this
there's a ton of forgiveness for that. You have to, I think,
well, you have to love yourself.
yeah, you have to accept that, because this is what I think about my medical training, that I did what I had to do. I survived. I helped a lot of people. You helped your family. And you did that in a way that long term is not healthy, right? If you did that when you were 75, it wouldn't be healthy. But in the moment, in the trauma, because trauma is real. It's not like it's not fabricated. You know what I mean? You really did experience a traumatic event. It's just like going to war. PTSD is legit. It's not fake. And it's okay to have an immediate coping strategy that is not a long-term coping strategy.
Right.
Because I have felt guilty. I felt not good about the disconnectedness that I felt as an intern and as a resident. But the truth is, I survived a very traumatic experience, just like a lot of medical people that train do.
Yep.
And that's okay. Unfortunately, in that setting, it worked so well that I just kept it going when it no longer served me. And I think that's so I have in the last year kind of forgiven myself for that detachment.
Well, I think that's what I wanted to talk about, which is the only thing I know to be true in loss. And when you're setting or you're growing, right? If we're using New Year's as an example of a new year, and you're wanting to take on newness and transition in this from what you were in partnership or in loss to who you are today without that person, and after the shattering and maybe after the trauma, you have to really accept that the only way to get over the bridge, and I'm not sure if there's a destination at the end of the bridge. What I'm learning is I keep doing healing, and I'm learning more and more and more and more about myself and my responses to trauma and my coping strategies, some which are from my childhood and some are which carried into like as reactions into this secondary part of my life where more trauma came along. You have to love yourself. I had to talk to couple of our kids are getting ADD tested or like retesting. They already have ADD and have been treated for it for a long time, but you have to like re-up every 5 years. And when I did the eval, the parent intake, I recognized when I say out loud all the things that my biological children have experienced, it brings on so much grief because there was such a lack of control in their childhood. And I, as a mom, I couldn't protect them from this major hardship and all their stuff. And as I tell the story out loud in a better space, I'm not saying it from an anxious mother lens. I'm saying it from a person who's processed it. And through that, I've had to love myself really hard that I didn't do great all the time. I didn't always do great. I didn't always do great in my business. I didn't always do great for Carl. I wasn't always a present mother in that. But I did the best that I could, given some really hard circumstances. And you have to say that to yourself out there if you're experiencing loss. Like, when these things happen, we're not prepared for them. Even if we prepare, which there's no preparing for death. And I prepared for death. Like, I actually did prepare. I tried to prepare my children. And no matter how much I tried to prepare, one of my children refused to believe that was coming and then still faced the death as though it was a sudden death. And it was a very long haul. And you can't process for others. And you have to love yourself for doing the best that you could with the knowledge that you had and the skills that you had and the resources that you were able to maintain at that difficulty. And so now, moving forward, if you have a refractory period or you're in a healing space or you're moving forward from loss, as I am, and I'm rebuilding my life and actively I am clawing for joy. I am trying to grow joy this year and believe that I'm worthy of it and not attached to the loss per se. Let it integrate. You are going to have to let your nervous system do the talking first. If you choose from your brain, or if I can only speak for myself, I guess. If I choose from my brain and I say this to my clients, like, it's very opposite of what there's a lot of shoulds up here in my head, but in my heart and in my body, I recognize that I have to slow down. I have to feel in my body some of this stuff to process it. And putting more to-do lists on yourself is a microcosm of dissociating and checking out.
Yeah.
And we don't always have the luxury of sitting in meditation all day about our feelings. But as I would guide my clients, I need to do more of myself, which is why I'm seeing this practitioner is get up in the morning and sit inside my body and see what comes up. Look at myself at the end of the night and say what's really happening instead of just pretending everything's fine.
Yeah. I think that's a great place to end.
You always say that in the weirdest times, and it's totally...
That's just because you don't ever feel it. That's my role here is to...
His role is to shut me up.
No, to feel that for you.
Well, let's end on a note of saying, obviously that is, how do you plan to be more loving towards yourself this year?
Me?
Mm-hmm. Or anything you're working on, just I know it's ongoing for you instead of year to year, but...
Yeah, I'm just going to continue to be aware, mindful, feel my body more, and continue to process what I want, what I need, and give that luxury to my children as well.
Yeah, that's nice.
And that's it.
For me, I think this year, it's a little bit scarier than usual. I think I'm going to allow myself, when I'm not okay, to not be okay. And I think I'm going to allow others, my children specifically, biological children, when they're not okay, to be okay and not attached to the fear around it. I think that's a big one for me, is I think I've not always been allowed to not be okay. I always am responsible and forward energy and building things and in charge of a lot of people and my children and family, and people always come to me to keep it all together. And what are we doing tonight? What are we doing for dinner? What do we, I'm definitely a leader in that way. And I love that. That's a natural skill set of mine. But when I'm not okay, instead of pushing through, because that's what my nervous system tells me is the safe thing to do versus being honest about where I am. And I've been really practicing that, honestly, mostly this week with David, just been I'm actually not okay. And is it safe to not be okay? And lucky enough for me, it is in this marriage and in this place. And I challenge all of you out there. So if you're not okay, can we let ourselves feel the not okay for a minute? Because as this new therapist told me, which is so enlightening to me, is these parts of ourselves that are not okay need to be recognized in order to heal. And if I don't bear witness to the not okay, I don't have to stay in it. I don't have to drown in it. Hopefully, get back to you. But I'm believing, because I've been through this already in other capacities of grief and healing, that if we bear witness to it, we'll be okay and better on the other side, I think.
Yeah.
Thank you guys so much for joining us today. Happy New Year 2025. We're coming in pretty honest today, as always. And, we have a lot of resources coming up this year. So thank you so much, and we'll see you next week.
If you enjoyed this episode of Wake the F Up, please like and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Join the Wake community by downloading our app. Just search for The Wake Wellness in the Apple or Android App Store. And follow us on Instagram at The Wake Wellness. Thanks for listening.